Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. Today, we have an amazing guest here. We have Donna Beckett here, who is a freelance recruiter who I'm personally rely on for all of my clients' recruiting needs. Hey, Donna, welcome. Thanks for your time today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We are going to be diving into workplace recruiting and how it is a huge project that needs to be carefully managed. But before we do that, tell our listeners about yourself and your recruiting experience and how you got to where you are now.
Yes, so thank you for asking. I've been doing recruiting since about the year 2000. Wow, it's a long time ago. I've worked in both temp to hire, permanent placement. I've worked in several different industries. I've recruited for C-level all the way down, every position that you could possibly think of in just about every industry.
I love it.
So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, well, and also before we jump in, hey, JC, how you doing over there?
Hey, Wendy Sellers, the HR lady, and the legendary recruiter, Donna. I'm doing fantastic. I'm hanging in there. It's really, really hot, though. It's got to be like 76 degrees outside today, Wendy, so I'm a little sweaty.
76 degrees. You're real funny. We're just going to jump over that topic right there. And I want to go back in talking about, the fact that recruiting for companies, it really is a project that needs to be carefully managed. And Donna, most businesses jump straight to posting a job ad. What should they be doing before that step?
Yes, very important. So managers, you guys need to strategize. Executives, management, you're going to want to ask your other hiring managers, your team, what are they expecting and where do they need the most help? You have to determine what position really fills the need. Conversation is really key in clarifying all of that. And this is really going to help you avoid wasting time in the hiring process. So strategize, plan and create realistic, measurable goals and intentions. And this really is important when you're writing a job description. So keep your company's core values in mind. And then again, clarify the role before jumping into the hiring process before you post anything. Make sure it's clear.
Right.
Make sure everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, it's so true because listen, folks, if you do not have a plan ahead of time and you don't get everybody on the team who's involved in the hiring process part of the plan, I don't know, somebody might be on vacation. And then now the candidates are waiting and waiting and waiting. And another company comes along and scoops them up because you put the job ad out at the wrong time. You have all these candidates and they're just sitting in an inbox. So that's never happened, right, Donna?
Oh, it happens all the time.
And then often, we just rush in. We fall in love with the first candidate that we interviewed, or maybe even the third candidate. And we say, we've already interviewed 10 candidates. We can't wait any longer. And so then we jump in and hire the wrong candidate. And JC, I think you have some statistics on how that's not a good idea.
Absolutely. 74% of employers admit they've hired the wrong candidate. Events that cost an average of $17,000 on average.
Yikes.
Per bad hire. Back to you.
Whoa, that's very expensive. I'm going to say if it costs $17,000 on average because of a bad hire, I don't know, maybe here's an idea. Hire an expert, a consultant, a recruiting expert, of course, that says, hey, I actually know what we're doing. And you might think it's expensive now, but it's way more expensive to either not hire anybody and then you lose customers or get sued because, something went wrong there. I wanted to, Donna, I want to get your opinion on, understanding realistic and measurable goals and intentions. And how about keeping your company values in mind when you're hiring for, a new hire?
100%. Yeah. Because you want to attract the people that are going to be inspired and passionate about what your company is trying to accomplish and their mission. So that's why I think it's really important, refer back to the core values when you're writing job descriptions, bring it up in interviews, let people know, like, it should be on your website. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And for folks, if you do not have core values, or you might call them something else, they're usually words like respect, professionalism, forward thinking. Now, I've seen many, many company values of organizations that they wrote them for a position and not for everybody. And I know you've probably heard me say this before on other podcasts with other guests, is I really, really believe that the company values should be in every single job description. And then naturally, when you're creating interview questions, you look at the job description. The behaviors are in the job description, and then you now turn those behaviors into questions. And then what do, Donna? You put them in scorecards?
Yes, you can. You can definitely do that. I recommend doing that.
So let's talk about scorecards a little bit more. How can hiring managers or hiring teams use scorecards to reduce bias and hire more effectively?
So first of all, it's important because you really want to be fair in the hiring process. And like you said, avoiding creating unintentional bias. So sometimes a gut feeling is not always going to lead to your best hire, nor does a potential employer referral. Obviously, those things are welcome as far as referrals go, and they can be extremely helpful because the more you know about a candidate, the better, but they're not always going to be that best person. So you do want to treat everybody fairly when you're doing interviews, no matter how this person came to you.
An interview score sheet. It can boost hiring accuracy by 40%, dramatically improving your ability to evaluate candidates objectively during structured interviews. Back to you.
Thanks, JC. I think that scorecard, score sheet, whatever it is, just think of it as a giant Excel sheet or a Google sheet that says, okay, we're going to put all the information about the candidates in here. Here are the 20 questions we're going to ask, and then we're going to give feedback based on those questions. Oh, and by the way, guess what's not on this scorecard? The questions about, the color of their skin, their sexual orientation, that's not on there. And so this is how you can really reduce this bias. What other suggestions do you have, Donna?
I would say, if you don't have the time, you can reach out to somebody like you or somebody like me to help create something for you that's standardized. But you really want to sit down and come up with the most important questions, and behavioral interviews is actually what I recommend the most to do. And I know we're going to get to this topic probably a little bit later, but you're going to be able to determine more about a candidate asking behavioral questions than you will, a standard list of, some of the things that are out there to ask. So
let's just go ahead and jump into that right now. Let's talk about behavior, because listen to this, folks. Hey, Donna, I understand that you are, in addition to being the most amazing recruiting consultant ever, you are also an animal trainer and behaviorist. How does that align with being a recruiter? And explain what an animal trainer and behaviorist is.
Yes, it's pretty unique, the background that I have. But animals, people, being observant about behavior, especially, for animals that don't communicate in the same language that we do. It takes a lot of, ability to pick up on tiny little nuances, tiny little changes, that could indicate there's something going on. And it really does help transfer for me into recruiting when I have conversations with people. And my interviewing style is very relaxed, so people tend to open up to me, and that's just kind of my style. But my background really does, they gotta go hand in hand, which a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah, I would have never, ever even thought about that, and it totally makes sense. Like, okay, you're treating animals by observing their body language because they can't speak. And then you're kind of doing the same thing in recruiting, even though the humans can speak. So do we all need to be trained as behaviorists now in order to be doing recruiting?
So I would say It's going to be hard to become a behaviorist if you haven't like been, hands-on in either an animal training job or you haven't studied it in education. But there are a lot of resources out there that you can go to that's going to give you behavioral-based questions. Yeah. So I would say recommend looking up different sources of, questions that you can put on a scorecard and what you can ask.
Absolutely.
75% of companies use behavioral interview questions to assess soft skills, showing structured conversational techniques like yours. They're not just effective, but widely adopted.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So let's jump into talking about, soft skills. I first of all, it drives me batty that they're called soft skills because it makes it seem like they're weak or not important. And they're often, most of the importance is soft skills. In fact, there's a study by Harvard that says 85% of job success comes from soft skills. So why do so many companies still focus on technical skills or resumes first? And on that same line, Donna, what are the top soft skills hiring managers should actually be looking for? And unless you are a behaviorist, how do you spot them in an interview?
Yes. I mean, we could definitely talk about this for a long time, but just to kind of summarize it, I think the statement of it's how it's always was done. We've always done it this way. It's worked for us in the past. I want to say that the keyword there is past. So what you did before is not necessarily going to be your most effective and efficient way to do things today. Change is good despite our internal resistance to do it, right? As far as, you want to look at the data that supports trends in hiring. Look at market rates for positions you're hiring for. As far as like the technical versus the soft skills, good candidates aren't always going to have all of the skills that you need. And when we say soft skills, we're talking about some of the most important things that you're looking for in a candidate. So those are the things like adaptability, motivation, desire to grow and learn, a collaborator. Are they a team player? Are they, how's their critical thinking and their communication skills? Really, soft skill is interpersonal. That is so important in evaluating candidates.
Yeah, it really is. It's so important. I mean, people, and just because they don't have the skills or the interview doesn't show that they have the skills, do an assessment. There's so many assessments out there and they're not that expensive in the big picture versus the, the average money that it's going to cost you if you hire the wrong person. But know that you're going to need people to lead, communicate, and adapt no matter what their role is. But if you're wanting them to be a supervisor, for example, you're going to need to give them the training. They may have the capability to be a supervisor and they just haven't done it yet. So we have to give them the training. On a little side note, as the HR lady, just because somebody has that they have experience as a supervisor on their resume doesn't mean that they have good experience or they actually have the skills. They may have just been shoved in that role because their company said, you've been here long enough. Why don't you just do this? And guess what? That's why they're leaving now.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah, I love it. So, what are the top soft skills that we should be looking for as a manager, as a hiring manager, as an HR team? And again, keeping those company core values in mind.
Yes. So I think, some of the most common core skills that people look for are some of the ones I mentioned: adaptability, the communication skills, the critical thinking, our presentation skills, depending on the role, interpersonal skills, problem solving, the human skills, which I would say, are they a team player? How do they collaborate? Are they going to put others down versus try to inspire them and lift them up? I think sometimes those types of things don't get talked about, and they're so important.
How do you spot these soft skills, so to speak, in an interview?
I think it's not what you ask sometimes, it's how you ask it. So behavioral-based questions are designed to uncover certain ways that people do things. So somebody's approach to the same problem is going to be very different from the other person's. So you can gauge kind of their thought process and how they're thinking. If you provide them with, say, hey, tell me about a time that you had a problem. How did you handle it? What was the outcome? What was the result? How did you get there? You're not just going over every past position. Of course, you want to know something about that role, but those key questions are they're going to help you uncover more information about this person so you can better evaluate.
Ms. Donna, I've got a question here for you. I'm sorry, Wendy, I'm going to jump on it.
That's okay.
So when we're thinking about that ideal candidate and the interview's going great and everything's like locked in, they seem like they're top tier, but they're not answering some of those questions the way that you need them to, the way that you're really looking for the perfect candidate to answer. Do you ever, maybe not you, maybe your peers, I don't know how it works, do you steer them towards the right answer a little bit if they're an 80 or 90% solution candidate, or do you just let the chips fall where they may and they could blow the whole thing in the final phase? I don't know. Question for you.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack with that question.
Let's unpack it.
First of all, if a candidate is not answering a question fully, there's a reason for it, right? So there could sometimes be something that's either holding them back, or they could potentially be misrepresenting information and telling you what they think you need to hear to get the job, right? So again, you don't want to be biased. So steering somebody in the direction of what you want them to say is highly not recommended. That doesn't make it, I don't recommend it.
Well, even if it's someone related to the CEO?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
The relation.
Just check.
Again, don't be biased.
Yeah. And then, let me jump in too, is just saying that, it's nerve-wracking to be a candidate. It is very nerve-wracking. Your whole life is on the line. You may have just lost a job because of a layoff, which is going on a lot right now, especially in the United States. And so you're nervous. And most people are not in a sales role, because it is. You're in a sales role. You're marketing yourself there, and you're just saying, okay, do I give them more than they're asking for, or do I just zip it? And is that my personality to zip it and only ask what I've been, what they've asked me? And so let's just answer that. So first of all, if you're a candidate that's listening to this podcast, I would definitely suggest that you do some role playing and practice ahead of time. And then if you are an interviewer in listening to this podcast, it's the same exact thing. Make sure you are prepared with questions, and then follow-up questions and follow-up questions and follow-up questions, right, Donna? Because if
100%.
you ask a yes/no question and they say yes or no, don't get mad if that's all they said.
Yeah, that's on you. That's on you, right?
That's very true. Very true.
Yeah. So really, being prepared with follow-up questions. And we have this wonderful, lovely thing called AI now. And any AI platform that you can possibly think of, you can just put into AI, hey, I have this job description. Here's a little bit about our company. You don't have to put the company's name in there. Provide me interview questions for this job description, and then provide me follow-up questions for each one if I don't fully understand the answer. I myself, while you were talking, Donna, I just put into ChatGPT, give me common questions for soft skills in an interview, period. That's all I put in there. And it came up with 18 questions in a couple different categories. One category, communication, teamwork, problem solving, time management, adaptability, and emotional intelligence, all the way down to how do you manage stress or pressure at work? How do you prioritize tasks when you have multiple deadlines? Can you share an example when you had time when you had to think on your feet? Or, hey, what do you think makes a team successful? I think the biggest thing, and this is a slap on my face too, is the fact that I don't have the patience to listen. And then I don't let them talk. So what are your thoughts on that, Donna?
Well, if you're getting to know somebody, then you need to let them talk, because if you're trying to fill a job that somebody is going to be supporting you or working with you, it isn't really about you in that moment. I mean, sure, open up and share, why you have this position open and tell them a little, be conversational, but let them talk.
Right. And be prepared to ask follow-up questions. And if it starts going sideways, that they're talking maybe too much about their personal stuff, being prepared to be like, okay, well, we're going to shift gears here. And I have a couple other questions. So I just want to stay on track here, because people do want you to know them as an individual, but sometimes they give a little bit too much information. What's up, JC? You have a question?
Yeah, I do. Donna, what about those crazy trick questions, like you're blindfolded. In front of you are 100 coins laying on a table. Like those tricky scenario things. Do you use those a lot?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Yeah.
If you're trying to set somebody up and, ask them to see if you can trick them, I don't recommend, because they're probably not going to want to work for you.
Right. And it's just weird. Like, that's a weird question. Like, all right, do you plan on blindfolding me at work? Why are you asking me that question?
Unrelated. Yeah. Completely not related.
It's important though. But getting back to the concept that we're talking about, preparation is so key, right? And
Yes.
So getting back to the topic of that, workplace recruiting is a project that truly does need to be managed. What else can businesses, hiring managers, HR, what can they do to make sure that recruiting is a project?
I think, making sure that there's several individuals involved, making sure that this is a team effort, getting input from your staff and your team, have some strategizing meetings before you, again, sit down and write the job description. You also, too, want to keep in mind that salary is a big deal. If you're going to be under market rates, you better have a good reason or a way to attract top talent, because people leave when they're undervalued. They feel undervalued. They feel unappreciated. I wouldn't stay at a company that did that to me.
Yeah,
I don't care how much you pay me even.
And folks, also a little legal reminder here that in many states, you are now required to put the compensation in the job ad. And so if this is super important, especially if you have remote workers and you're opening up your remote working possibilities to anywhere, other countries, that's a whole other tax issue there. Talk to your CPA, your CFO, please. Or if you're just saying, hey, we don't care where you live in the United States, this is a remote role. Well, if that's the case, then you're going to have to probably put the compensation in the job ad, because if somebody's applying from a state that has that law, that is required. Now, here's the other thing, the interesting thing, just a little sidebar from the HR lady, is if you have not been transparent previously with your current employees, and then they see a job ad out there that has, oh, look, this new person that's coming in, if they get hired, is going to be paid $25,000 more than me. That might be a little bit of an issue, right, Donna?
Absolutely.
Because they might be like, yeah, I'm gonna interview for that, and I'm gonna quit my job over here at this desk, and then I'm gonna interview for that one because you're paying more. You're gonna definitely open up a huge can of worms. So if transparency, if you're claiming it's part of your company values and your company culture, then you better make sure that it means to your current employees too. Let's stay on the same topic about compensation. Without saying any names of companies or individuals, anytime you've, gotten uncomfortable with interviews where candidates are asking more and more details about, well, how do I get that bonus? Give me information.
I think it all goes back to what you just said, is being transparent. Make sure that you're looking at salary trends. Make sure you're, for your current employees, make sure you have performance reviews in place. Give your staff the opportunities to prove that they, deserve raises and promotions and training. Hey, guess what? You can train individuals into another internal job. And then, you don't even have to go out and hire. You can hire internally.
Right. Or you could backfill their role and promote them internally. The other thing that I wanted to say too, and this is part of recruiting, but it's also part of employee management, but think about it in the recruiting sense as well, is making sure that when you are interviewing people, that the entire team, the hiring team, understands, okay, if I was hired, so I'm the candidate, if I was hired, what are going to be my goals and metrics? And if they don't know them in the interviewing, how are they going to know them in 2 weeks from now when we start? So making sure that, you have their SMART goals or their KPIs ready, or at least draft it, because it's going to be down to the individual, and understanding everybody on the team, down to the receptionist, who usually ends up being unofficially part of the recruiting team. Make sure they know the laws, what you cannot ask, what you should be asking, salary transparency. Like I said, certain states, Colorado, California, New York are a couple of them. And then where do people, even apply to? Your receptionist might say, oh, just send a resume to me. But it's like, no, you actually have to apply on that applicant tracking system. One other thing that I don't think we're prepared to ask you yet, Donna, but I want to throw this in is, what about the possibility of somebody might have a disability and they're asking for an accommodation during the interviewing process? What do you do?
Well, I mean, you want to follow the guidelines, the legal, regulations that are in place. I mean, fairness is for everybody, right? So, if there are accommodations, if it's something that can be done, make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. Okay. Big question here. What's one common hiring mistake you see all the time, and how can our listeners avoid it as the hiring team?
Number one is time wasted. If you're not prepared and you don't have guidelines and job descriptions in order, if you haven't spoken to your hiring managers and your teams, and you're just throwing words for a description on paper without really thinking about, again, what does the company really need? What does your team really need? What are your manager's expectations? Get like teammates, those individuals that are going to be working with this person, get some input from them, because they're the ones that are going to be in the trenches, right? They're going to be sitting next to each other or whatever. Get their input too. So it's a hard process. It's never easy, and it's very time consuming. But the more preparation you can do up front, the better you're going to be set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, preparing upfront, again, like it's a project. We wouldn't just go and, if we're a construction company, an engineering company, we wouldn't go like, oh yeah, we got this gig, let's start Monday. We'd have meetings after meetings after meetings. We'd have an entire plan with deadlines and metrics, not just the metrics that I was talking about before about like the SMART goals or the KPIs, but more of the metrics of how long are we going to leave this position open if we don't find the right candidate? Maybe there's something wrong with the role. Maybe it's like you mentioned, Donna, that's not the right pay, or there's just not the degrees or the certifications that we're saying is required. Maybe it's really not, because it's not available. And if it is, maybe we have to hire from across the globe. So really not rushing through the process, which I think JC has a stat about that.
56% of senior decision makers say rushed hiring processes are a major cause of making a bad hire, and that often stems from underestimating how much time quality recruiting truly takes.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that, Donna?
The big key word there is quality.
Right. It really is.
Yeah, quality. You can't rush it.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's 100%. Folks, recruiting is a project. It's a project that needs to be very well managed. It needs to be planned out in advance before you even put that job ad out. And I'm going to say this again, before you put that job ad out, because I've seen it so many times, like we'll put a job ad out, and then while that's running, we'll start coming up with a project plan. And it's like, no, that's too late, because if there's a a phenomenal candidate, I can assure you they probably applied to more than one job than just yours. And now you've missed the boat because you didn't have a process in place to say who's going to pick up the phone, who's going to call them, who's going to email them, who's going to get them on a Zoom or in here in person as well. So super, super important. This has been so helpful. I could talk to you all day about this. But before we wrap up, Donna, Beckett, how can people connect with you?
They can send me an email, Donna@thehrlady.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can hit me up there. And then, of course, if you do have questions, just email me and I'm happy to we can have a conversation over the phone.
All right, excellent. I'll make sure that her LinkedIn profile is in the podcast notes. Remember, folks, that you can get HRCI and SHRM credits for listening to this. And here's a stat for you. 87% of podcast listeners say that they gain valuable insights that they wouldn't have discovered elsewhere. And the fact is, on this podcast, you actually get credits to keep your certification up. So that is just amazing. Thank you, Aurora Training Advantage. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I truly hope this podcast has been beneficial. The fact that recruiting is a project that needs to be carefully managed is so, so important and so true. Thanks, Donna. Take care.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.